been a long time. We came here. This was a mysterious place with so many unknown constraints, and we had to review hundreds of pages of PDFs to try to understand, of the as-built, to understand how the site has been transformed over time.
I went over to those boxes that I just laid my hands on, and I felt something. It was so emotional that tears, I couldn't stop crying.
For 2 centuries, New Yorkers of African descent were laid to rest at a burial ground sitting at 126th Street in East Harlem. But over time, the history of this site was lost, erased by centuries of displacement, development, and neglect.
The Harlem African Burial Ground was in place around the 1600s as a result of the Low Dutch Reformed Church creating this cemetery for descendants of African descent, enslaved and free, in one cemetery. And then in a different cemetery, they had also interred people of European descent. So these were cemeteries that were in place since the 1600s through the late 1800s.
It was common practice to segregate burial spaces. A space was created called God's Acre for the burial of people of European descent, and a separate space that was not only segregated, but disrespected, because from time to time it was used for the grazing of animals. Animals were grazing and people were farming and doing other things while funerals were going on. There was gross disrespect, from the beginning. And of course, that continued in this burial space that is known as the Negro or Harlem African Burial Ground.
As the city began to expand northward, there were more developments happening in the area surrounding the Harlem African Burial Ground. The church made the decision to care for the remains of those of European descent by removing their remains to Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx, but they left behind the remains of those who were buried in the Harlem African Burial Ground. Through the course of development since the 1800s, those remains were disturbed, dislocated, really erasing the existence and the remembrance of this site as a Harlem African Burial Ground, because instead what people experienced and saw in its place were the different kinds of commercial development that had happened. Those uses included beer garden, military barracks, movie production studios. People probably had no conception or any sense that there were people buried there who were part of the city's development in its early colonial history.
I received a call from the director who was building the Willis Avenue Bridge, and said, "Do you know that your church is the owner of some remains?" And then called Congressman Rangel. He said, "The first thing you need to do, go to your city council person."
I was a city council member here in the 8th Councilmanic District from 2006 through the end of 2017, and was Speaker of the City Council for the last 4 years of my term. The Allendorf Church, Reverend Singletary, approached me in my first term when I was in the council and said, "Hey, did you know?" And I was fascinated, obviously, by the history of it. It's a dark history, but the history of it. And she indicated that she was very much interested in getting support from the elected officials in order to memorialize, right, that cemetery. And so that's how I came about to learn about it, was through her advocacy. I told her, well, I'm here to help. I think this is really important for the larger community to really understand that we memorialize the space. So why don't we develop a working group that is chaired by you, Reverend Singletary, myself in my office, and that we could convene, right, other electeds and other stakeholders in the community to really figure out how we push this project forward.
Melissa gave me the impetus to go and do and ask people, would they be a part of the task force and why? And we had over 30, 35 at a time around the task force from different churches coming in. And we research and had a research team within that group.
So that task force served as the agency and the vessel by which we could convene agencies, stakeholders, other elected officials to advance the agenda of what Elmendorf was asking us to do. And so that was something that was very effective in creating that task force. We have a mutual respect and liking of one another. So that transcended the usual community meeting, community members. No, we literally came together like a small family, and we all had the same vision. And so, yeah, I think it could not have happened without these powerful women at the hub. Where we are going to have the bus depot that has been decommissioned, that a part of that bus depot is on the perimeter or within, right, where that burial ground was. We have developed a partnership with the city, a very strong partnership with EDC. But we got to a point of now being able to work side by side, been an incredibly strong partner to advance this project and be where we are today.
I started on the project in 2016. The initiative had been advocating for this project for 7 years by that time, but it was an exciting time. The MTA had ceased operations on the site, and there was a new task force formed called the Bus Depot Task Force with elected officials, community stakeholders, and the initiative, as well as city agencies. At its heart, it's a restorative justice project, and there were very real conversations early on about how to prioritize across multiple needs and wants, both from the initiative, but also from the broader community, which were then incorporated into the city's commitment for transforming the site.
AQRF was retained by EDC in 2015 to start work on this project. We were honored to work with what was then the Harlem African Burial Ground Task Force. Our work back then was really exploratory. It was limited to confirming whether or not human remains are still present on this site. We did confirm that they are, in fact, here.
There are extremely few Black bioarchaeologists, and so it feels like a real privilege, but also a responsibility to be on these kind of projects and make sure that there are people who are caring for their ancestors and thinking about the broader context of their life. And I think there's something to me really special about thinking about these people who are not legally allowed to read, and I get to read and write full time as a job. And so the way I think to pay that back for me and sort of honor them as the best I can is to work on these sites.
Walking the grounds where the remains are and were was a spiritual experience for me. Being a minister, when we discovered the remains, they had them encased in boxes. And I went over to those boxes and I just laid my hands on it. And I felt something. It was so emotional that I couldn't stop crying. And everyone around me got emotional too, and they couldn't understand why they were emotional, but it was a spiritual experience. I felt the spirits of the ancestors, and it allowed me to know that they were saying thank you.
Well, it was enormously gratifying. We knew, I'm a local historian, so I knew that these burial spaces existed. But when you find one particular one, it just confirms what you know, not only from your own knowledge and education, but from the historical record. So
we're honored to come back in 2025 and do more of a thorough recovery to help what is now the initiative reclaim the site on behalf of the community. We continue to find, spread across this large site, just a significant number of remains in a fairly good state of preservation that we can look at and really learn about the people who were buried here and what happened to them.
Depending on which bones we have, we would be assessing someone's age, their biological sex. Some of these, in particular leg bones that we have, we can estimate folks' stature, so how tall they were. A lot of indicators of hard labor and repetitive activities that leave mark on bone. There's many young kids and they're like maybe late teens, early 20s. I'm not ashamed to admit how many times I cried, in the makeshift lab there when I realized, this is a child, this person had this horrible injury.
This field work is finished, and it was a great deal of effort, lots of dirt and sweat, and sore muscles. But the real work is just beginning now.
The East Harlem community has been at the center of the decades-long effort to celebrate and memorialize the Harlem African Burial Ground. Their input has helped shape what the site will become for future generations.
The opportunity to speak with community and be with community was a critical part of this process and really helped inform how we should approach engagement, who we should be approaching, and how to be sensitive to the history that exists here in East Harlem. And so that ultimately will help us understand how to build the cultural center, how to build the memorial, and how to think about this space in the future. Beginning in 2024, the New York City Economic Development Corporation, alongside Bridge Philanthropic Consulting and the Harlem African Burial Ground Initiative, launched a 18-month engagement campaign going to the local school and presenting to either kindergartners or eighth graders or high schoolers, participating in panels throughout the city, doing public presentations to the community board or to elected officials, and participating in any New York City event that would have us spread this information and this history to New York City residents.
So, the plan for the Harlem African Burial Ground site is to create a full mixed use development program that'll include an outdoor memorial that'll be on the historic boundary of the burial ground site, as well as an indoor cultural education center that'll be dedicated to sharing the story of the Harlem African Burial Ground. We will have affordable housing, commercial and retail space, as well as a community space. With the cultural education center, that was one of the main things that the community wanted to see, is having a space that not only welcomes, tourists and residents alike to East Harlem, but also shares its rich history. And I think that's something, a lot of work has gone into it, and I think that's really important to share.
The metaphor that I've been thinking about is imagining almost the Harlem African Burial Ground being threads that for a long period of time were severed from the fabric of the neighborhood, from the fabric of the city that was continuing to develop. Restoring this Harlem African Burial Ground is sort of restitching that thread that had been severed back into the fabric of the community of Harlem and back into the city.
It's real. They're real. They're real. We honor you. We recognize you. You haven't been forgotten.
The Harlem African Burial Ground stands alongside burial sites across New York that remind us of the enduring presence, resilience, and contributions of African descendants in the city's history.
There really are cemeteries under our feet when we don't even realize it. So if that work helps to help communities like the Harlem African Burial Ground Initiative and communities in other parts of the city identify where cemeteries are present near them, especially ones associated with marginalized groups who were either denied permission to protect their cemeteries or legally prevented from protecting cemeteries. Hopefully it gives people the tool to both identify and reclaim sites.
Now, after a decade of archaeological work, the site is ready for its next chapter. This is more than a project site. It's a legacy in motion.
The history, the contributions, the sacrifices of free and enslaved Africans were ignored, disrupted, demoralized, dispossessed, etc. And free and enslaved Africans brought the skills that built this city and nation, and people need to know that.